Hi, I'm Kent. Let's try and make some more speckled glaze. Not too long ago, I made this. This is a speckled glaze that has blue speckles in it. The idea is to create a special speckle mixture. It's basically a cone 10 glaze that gets broken up and then sintered, and then is added into a base glaze. The idea was the sintered speckles don't dissolve in the new glaze and can stay relatively localized. And since they melt at a higher temperature, they don't go ahead and diffuse through the whole glaze. So before I did that with cobalt and it turned into these nice blue speckles, I'm going to try a couple of different ingredients this time. So here's the recipe I got from Old Forge. So you can search for this on Glaze. So his Blizzard, he called them sprinkles. Most of these are in his first 5 recipe, the silica, the whitening, the kaolin. The cobalt carbonate is the blue. So this one here is a 0.5% added of the speckle mixture, creates these nice blue specks. And the special ingredient that he added for this one is custard feldspar. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix up another batch of this. Last time I went ahead and did 100 grams, which was too much. I'm gonna divide that by 3. And that is because the cobalt was added at 3 grams. So if I divide that by 3, it'll be 1 gram. And so I can use that as the base. So I'm gonna do this and try and get some different colored speckles. Off camera, I went ahead and mixed up these 2 sets, and this are each 1/3 of this base recipe. So the only thing missing are the additions. Well, what are we going to add? About a year ago, I was trying my hand at speckles, both in my clay body and in my glaze, and I had found online there were a couple ingredients I could use. So I found Granular Ilmenite and Granular Rutile. So I was reading this on a couple of old forums, and the idea is that because they're granular as opposed to powder, they will stay intact in the glaze or clay body and won't melt all the way. I had some mixed success with that. In the clay body, it seemed to work okay. In my glaze at the time, it basically disappeared. So I want to go ahead and revisit that. Before I was using my local Pottery store base glaze, and I really don't know what's in that. So by using Joe's base glaze, I have a little bit better idea of what's going on. If I wanted to in the future, I could tweak that. Kent from the slight future here. One of the differences between the Pottery store's base glaze and my own is that I know the ingredients. The last time when I used the Pottery store's glaze, the speckles wind up disappearing. I'm pretty sure that's because of the fluxes in the glaze. Since I don't know what that glaze is made of and I don't know what fluxes are in there, the fluxes will help things melt at lower temperatures. And from what I read online, the granular materials were supposed to stay solid longer and not melt. So I'm guessing fluxes in that base glaze help them melt and disperse through the glaze. By using my own base glaze, and I know the ingredients and the fluxes in particular, I can potentially control how much it melts. I'm guessing the sintered speckles will work just fine, but if I want to try and use the granular material in my regular glaze again, probably changing those fluxes will be key. So these are our 2 additions, so I'm going to pull out my haste scale and we're going to add some. So I think both of these basically have an iron base in them with some extra impurities in them, if I remember correctly. So the old ratio was 3% of the cobalt carbonate, and cobalt's a really strong colorant, and 3% is a lot. Like my glaze, I'll put 1% in. So I think I might bump that up to maybe double, so 6. And again, since I'm doing 1/3, that'll be 2 grams. So this is what it looks like. It's got a nice metallic shine to it. So I want to add 2 grams. I forget how heavy it is. All right, 2, perfect. All right, let's set that off to the side in front of the right bag. And then we will take next one, tear it out. And here is the ilmenite. Also black powder, maybe a little less shiny. So I'm gonna do 2 grams of this as well. There we go, 2 grams. I'll give these a quick stir just to mix them up a little bit. All right, now we want to add some water. Since I'm going to dry these out, I just want to add enough water to get it wet and to be able to thoroughly mix it. All that water is going to have to come back out. Let's put a little in each here. I'll go ahead and stir these up really well. I will then set them out and let them fully dry, and we'll come back to them and I'll show you the next step. All right, these have all dried out. I set them in front of the fan and all the water evaporated. One of the things I had forgotten about working with this granular material is it's very heavy and it settles out very fast. And since these needed to sit and dry, that means there was plenty of time for everything to settle. So here, you can see it's broken up a little bit. All of the rutile sank to the bottom. And again, this is the granular rutile. The ilmenite, it's a little bit harder to tell. I think maybe it's suspended more. We'll see how that impacts the sintered speckles. Next up is to break this into chunks. So I got a piece of parchment paper out of the kitchen, and we'll just break these up. This stuff is very powdery, so it doesn't take much pressure. The other thing I did is I made this jar and put a bunch of holes in the lid so I can filter out just the big chunks. So let's dump all that in. Put on the lid. I'll put all the small chunks back in here. All right, and then that means these can be processed some more. So now I have a piece of bisque ware. I'm just going to go ahead and put all these in there. And then these will go in my next bisque firing. And we'll do the same with the ilmenite. All right, there we go. The speckle mixture all broken up. Next stop, bisque firing. Once they're done there, we can move on with the process. The speckle mixture looks like it fired okay in the bisque fire. This one's the rutile, so it's got these little black specks. I think that looks okay. Here's the ilmenite. One thing I should do is test real quick to make sure it doesn't dissolve. The cobalt one fused okay, but just in case. So I'll take a little bit here, dump it in, dump it in. All right, while that's hanging out, I'm gonna break this up the rest of the way. That's interesting, the cobalt one stained the bisque ware, this one did not. Well, there are chunks here, they're all very loosely bound together, so they didn't fuse too much. These look like they're usable now, and you can't see, but the speckles are still hanging out in here, so they didn't dissolve, so we did have a proper sintering. Next up is to mix the speckled glaze. So in here, I've measured out some base glaze, and I went ahead and added the right amount of zirconium. It's 4% by dry weight. And now I want to add in the speckle mixture. And I want to add this to 1% by dry weight. Dump that over here. I'll go ahead and label these before I forget and get them mixed up. Got to write granular on these since the rutile I have both kinds. All right, since these look the same, I will not get them all confused, so I can put away the speckle mixture. And now I need to give these a good stir. So to do that, I'll use my immersion blender. That's good. Go ahead and clean off the head. Do the ilmenite. All right, while those are all nice and mixed up and the speckles are in suspension, we'll go ahead and dip a pot. So this is the granular rutile speckle mix. I don't quite have enough to get all the way down, but we'll go as far as we can. These little chunkies here are the speckles. Set this one in front so we know which one it is. And the ilmenite. All right, we'll go ahead and let those set up. So I've got two other containers of glaze here, and what I want to do is put in just the granular material into the base glaze. I think I'm going to do 6% addition of this. Last time I fired it, it basically disappeared, so we'll see if we can go overboard. So 6% is going to be 12 grams. Now we're going over here. All right, and 12 grams of the ilmenite. So I just went and got some clean water so I don't cross-contaminate everything. Mix these up. Again, I don't think we'll be able to get all the way down, but we'll go as far as we can. At this point, you can see all the black specks in it. And the ilmenite, same thing. at this point, they look almost the same. All right, there we go. We have the speckled Rutile and Ilmenite with the zircopacks and the glaze, and then we have straight up granular Rutile and Ilmenite at 6% levels. I went ahead and dropped a piece of paper in here so I can remember what's what. Before these go into the glaze fire, I will take that out to be sure. And in the meantime, I also need to glaze the inside of these pots, but I'll do that off camera. Let's see how these speckles turn out. Glaze firing next. We had a good glaze firing. Let's see the results. So here is the primary test. So this one here is the Rutile, and this one's the Ilmenite. And there is definitely a faint speckling going on. This one here has slightly brownish specks. I suspect I should increase the percentage. This probably wasn't enough. And here's the Ilmenite, and these are darker. So I think we have a step in the right direction, but this is probably too subtle for what I am actually going for. And then we have the additional comparisons. Here, there is a much more striking effect. So this is the one with it added straight to the glaze, and you can see the underlying colors now. So this one is this brownish color. It's in here, but barely. I think this is a little bit overboard, and I was worried about disappearing, and indeed it did not this time around. And likewise for the Ilmenite. This one has a little bit more yellowish color to it. It's definitely an interesting effect, but I'm not quite sure it's what I was looking for. But again, the primary test was, does the granular material show up? I was actually surprised about these glazes, so I went ahead and dug up my original test tiles. So back here is my bin of test tiles. Here are the original two that I did. So this has 6% by dry weight added to the glaze. I went ahead and had marked the bottom, so I was able to find it. So these two have the exact same amount of Rutile added, and likewise for Ilmenite. However, as I alluded to before, it's a different base glaze. So this was my house base glaze, the one from my local pottery shop, and this one I mixed up. Here, all the Rutile basically disappeared. Likewise for the Ilmenite, whereas in this first 5 glaze, it is much more strong and still showed up. So that definitely goes to show you the impact of the underlying base glaze that you're using and what you put into it. As I was digging through my tiles, apparently I've actually done this test before. So I found this tile here, which on the bottom I wrote Ilmenite 2% first 5. So this is the same first 5 glaze. And so this is what it looks like at 2% addition as opposed to the 6% that I did. Apparently I've been doing this long enough that I've forgotten some of the tests I've done, but I think it's good to revisit it either way. So we definitely learned something, or maybe relearned it, and that is that adding the Ilmenite and the Rutile to this first 5 base glaze, the granular material still stays there. This isn't the effect I was going for. I don't know, what do you think? Do you like it? I'm sure someone will. But as I said, it wasn't the effect I was going for. There may be some potential here. I will definitely need to ramp up the amounts next time around to see if it shows up or not. So I've been doing a lot of speckles recently, and those are the last of the tests that I've done so far. I will probably revisit all of these speckle tests in the future. Let me know which ones are your favorite and which ones you think you want me to try. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.